Welcome to Family Basics 101. I'm Dr. Bruce McClure, the local minister at the Prince George's Church of Christ, and we're located at 7800 Central Avenue in Landover, Maryland. Throughout the week, we focused on the topic of finding the right person. Many times in relationships, people will say, well, I can't find Mr. Right, or I can't find Mrs. Right. And oftentimes that is a true statement, nonetheless. But also, what might be true is, am I ready personally to receive Mr. or Mrs. Right? Is Mr. Right or Mrs. Right eluding me, or am I eluding them? In essence, an individual may not be ready, may not be right themselves to put themselves in a relationship with other people. So today I would like for us to focus on a simple question. Are you a believer in you? Very simple. Are you a believer in you? But it actually is a serious question as it pertains to, am I ready for a relationship? Believing in self, what does that really mean? According to the Berkeley Wellness or the Berkeley Well-Being Center, believing in yourself means having confidence in your own abilities, being able to trust yourself to do what you say you'll do, and knowing that those efforts will result in the desired outcome that you've set out to accomplish. Now, that means that being in yourself comes from a mixture of several key psychological experiments. Being in oneself means I'm in an experience such as self-worth, and I'm going to value my own self-worth inside of me. It also means experiencing self-confidence inside of self. We don't look to our neighbor, we don't look to our friends to give us self-confidence. We must first look inside to determine, do I have self-confidence? Self-trust, do I trust myself, or am I perpetually second-guessing myself? What about autonomy? I can fly solo, or I can fly in a group. I'm okay either way. I can make unilateral decisions, but I can also support group decisions. Autonomy. I don't need the crowd's approval. And I'm going to master my own environment. I don't need other people to be the master of my environment. That's what believing in self really does. And it means a lot in terms of reaching into the lives of other people wanting a long-term relationship. When we look at personal self-image and success, again, do I believe in me? In an article published by Penn State University back in October 28th of 2020, a student's academic self-concept was found to be the most critical factor when evaluating the chance for success. Self-concept. That was the most critical factor in evaluating the chance for success. Self-concept was more a predictor than a person's race, their ethnicity, their socioeconomic status. The most crucial component was, what type self-concept does this individual possess? Rady, Kaper, and Elnaty, in an article published in 2016 in the American Journal of Nursing Science, found that self-concept is the core of human personality. This means that it is the very root of how an individual views self, including their own personal characteristics, which is interesting. Am I okay in my own skin? Am I okay with the hue of my skin? There are African American people, of which I am one, who, if they had the skin hue that I have, they would feel like my self-image is real low. There are African Americans who are darker than I am, and their image can be extremely low. There are African Americans who are much more lighter, and their concept can be extremely low, depending on the environment they're in, even among Blacks. So even when we look at the thickness of our lips, when we look at the size of our ears, what if we had some type of birth defect, missing a finger or webbed fingers? People must have a good self-concept when it comes to their own personal characteristics, in terms of their qualities. Look, I'm okay with the qualities I have, and I don't need others to affirm me, or do I? These are the things that you bring to the table. Are you okay with that? What about your own personal failings? Are you able to say, yeah, I really messed up at that. I messed up in relationships. I messed up financially. I've embarrassed myself socially. I've even got a jail record. But are you able to still have a personal self-image that, in spite of all of the failures, I'm still an okay person? The life struggles you've gone through, are you still able to understand and embrace yourself as being okay, although you've gone through multiple struggles? Maybe you're going through struggles now, but what type of personal self-image do you still hold on to? Successes. How do you handle successes? Well, if I succeed in this area, then I don't want people to think that I think I'm better than them. So I will still, my family used to use the term poor mouth. So we constantly are going around poor mouthing ourselves. Instead of embracing our successes, we minimize them. And yet we want to be in a relationship where people will love us and will look up to us, and we don't even look up to our own selves. Values that are felt to be important. How do you embrace those? Are you perpetually compromising? Are you perpetually saying, well, I know this is important to me. This is not something I'm willing to compromise on, but because my self-image needs the approval of other people, then I'm going to surrender this and I'm going to surrender that. Values that are important to you Are you willing to embrace those values, even if others threaten or sometimes actually separate from the relationship? Uh, don't expect others to give you you. In relationships, this is very important. Albert Bandura, a clinical psychologist, talks about self-efficacy. And Bandura will make the case that self-efficacy is a person's belief in their own abilities to succeed in a particular situation because of how the individual thinks, behaves, and feels within self, not getting the external approval of others, but how they handle what goes on within self about how to organize and execute a plan of action designed to manage a specific situation. One of the personal jokes you'll hear me say over and over again, if I'm faced with a dilemma of repairing something or something breaks, I'll either fix it or break it even worse. But I'm going to give it the best shot I've got. I'm not going to sit around and wait on the consensus. If something needs to be handled, I'm going to use the abilities that I have in that moment. It may not be the best. It may not always be right. It may not always turn out right. But when we deal with our own self-concept of self, and we understand at some point self-efficacy must kick in. And I don't have time to look around and search for someone else to give me authorization to be me. Self-efficacy is comprised of a person's attitude, a person's abilities, and a person's cognitive skills that are all within the framework of the individual. So when we're looking for external relationships, first we must look internally at ourselves to say, where am I in this? Am I already a person who, if put in a certain situation, I'm already a person who can handle that situation? I can think through it, I can behave, I can act through it, and I can feel okay within myself as I move through whatever the situation is that I'm presently faced with. I hear people say, man, I've got to have me a man to get me. You don't need a man to get you through life. I've got to have this woman to get me through life. You really don't. Because if we're not already at a high optimum rate of functionality before a relationship, then in essence, what we're saying is, I need somebody to always affirm, and I need someone to always co-sign, empower me to be me. Let's look at one Bible illustration of this that hopefully will illustrate what I'm trying to say. Moses' struggle was inside himself. Everything that we're going to look at on this slide, God has to confront Moses, not about the external locus of control, but God has to keep pulling Moses back into himself. What about your struggles? Are they like Moses? God loved Moses. God is going to use Moses. God calls Moses for a purpose. And because of Moses's own internal struggles with believing in himself, God has to keep dealing with him and helping him to understand, Moses, it's going to be okay. But you've got to first recognize that you're already okay. So in Exodus chapter 4, verses 1 through 13, that's where God is going to meet Moses at the burning bush, and God is going to give Moses what is a charge to go back into Egypt and get the entire nation of Israel released from the Egyptians. Well, Moses grew up in the home of this Egyptian, and Moses understood the dynamics of Pharaoh. And Moses became intimidated by what he knew about somebody else. But in the process of being intimidated by somebody else's abilities and strengths, he began to minimize his own. So Moses answered the Lord and said, "But behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice. For they will say, the Lord hath not appeared unto thee." Everything Moses is saying is external to him. He's not listening to himself and his own strengths. He's being intimidated, controlled by what he saw in others. And the Lord has to talk him off the cliff. What do you have in your hand? Moses, what do you possess in your hand? Moses, put forth your hand and take the serpent by the tail. Now, if you know anything at all about handling serpents, you know you never grab a serpent by the tail. But God is saying, Moses, think about the valor that's in you. Think about the confidence that is already in you. Grab the serpent by the tail. He says, most people are not going to do that, Moses, but you will. Put now thine hand into thy bosom. And when Moses looked at it, it was leprous. He says, now put your hand into your bosom again. And it had turned back from being leprous to being like all of the other flesh. And then God said, if they will not listen to your voice, then I've got something for that too. If you will take water and pour it on dry land, it will become blood. There are only 2 or 3 tools that God keeps pointing Moses to in terms of self-confidence, self-efficacy. Use the gift of your hands. Remember, what's in your hand, put forth your hand, put your hand in, take your hand out. Use the power of your voice. If they don't listen to you, if they don't listen to what you are saying, the only reason they don't listen to you is because they're not listening to me. But Moses, if they don't hear from me, it will be because you did not allow them to hear from me. You refused to use your voice. You've got the gift inside of you. And remember, Moses is even going to become a little bit defensive about that because he has a speech impediment. And God says, well, who made your voice? So I'll make your brother your voice. But you've got to have confidence in yourself. You're not going to be able to go into the lives of other people and be a blessing to them until you put your head in the air and you start walking in confidence. Percent success, and Moses is doubting his own abilities. That's what relationships are about today. People say they want relationships, but they keep doubting themselves. And yet they keep looking for others to affirm them. I love my wife, but I don't need my wife to affirm me. I didn't marry my wife for her to affirm me. I love my mother and my father, and we're going to talk about this a little bit tomorrow. Affirmation starts early in the home. It was my mother and father's responsibility to affirm me, to instill certain values and certain attributes in me. That's not the responsibility of my wife. Now, my wife can encourage me in those areas that I struggle with, but my struggles, my inability, my fears, I can't dump that on her. I'll share with you tomorrow who we can dump it on. But God has put within each of us a built-in ability to be successful, to have excellent relationships, to believe in ourselves, even with all of our brokenness, all of our shortcomings. God still expects for us never to look to others to give us what he's already given us. You look great. Well, that's great for you to say so, but it's not going to make or break your day. I love your attitude. Well, that's great that it's noticeable, but if a person despises your attitude, that shouldn't make or break your day. Come back tomorrow and we will talk more about how you build and how you stir up the gift that is already in you that makes for better relationships. Because believing in self, I think, is the key, the foundational key to relationships really being positive. How we walk in a room, how we conduct ourselves, I think that's the key to effective relationships. I'll see you back in class again tomorrow. Don't be late and don't skip class. God bless everybody.